I'm Elex Michaelson. This week on The Issue Is, an exclusive with Democratic presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. one-on-one at his home, and an exclusive with Republican presidential candidate and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, as The Issue Is starts right now.
Broadcasting across California, you're watching The Issue Is.
Robert Kennedy Jr. is a unique presidential candidate. He's a member of perhaps the most iconic Democratic family who is running a populist anti-establishment campaign. So much has been written about him. Much of it is not accurate. This week, we sat down at his LA area home for an extensive one-on-one to understand what he's really about. Bobby Kennedy Jr., thank you so much for having us. Welcome to The Issue Is.
Elex, thank you for having me.
And what a beautiful home you have. And it's especially cool to see that bust of your father behind you as well, to remind us where we are. So usually, this is the last question I ask somebody, but I think it's important to ask you as the first question. What do you think is the biggest misconception about you?
If all you're watching is CNN, MSNBC, and reading the New York Times, I think almost everything that you would believe about me would be a misconception.
What's the thing that bothers you the most?
Racism, anti-Semitism, the vaccine stuff I've heard for many years. People call me anti-vax. I've never been anti-vaccine. I've said that thousands and thousands of times. Most Americans, if they understood my view of vaccines, would agree 100% with me. I think everybody who wants a vaccine ought to be able to get one. I don't think people should be forced to take any kind of a medical intervention against their will. I think people should have good information, and that the science on vaccines should be robust. And I think we ought to do everything we can to free the public health agencies from corrupting entanglements with the pharmaceutical industry. We see that, what it did with the opioid crisis, and it's doing that. It has that same impact in the entire realm of public health regulation.
So we know you say you're not anti-vax. We know that you've taken vaccines yourself. Your kids have taken vaccines as well. What vaccines would you be pro?
If a vaccine did what it said it was going to do, which is to prevent me from getting sick, so that if I took that product 5 years from now, I would be healthier and more likely to be alive than I didn't, then I would take that product. But we need those kind of studies, and unfortunately, those studies aren't done. It's the only medical product that does not have to do pre-licensing safety studies. So none of the 72 vaccines that are now mandated for our children has ever been studied pre-licensing in a placebo-controlled trial.
The CDC this week recommending the COVID vaccine for everybody 6 months and up. What do you make of that?
There's literally never been a single clinical trial on it. So I don't think FDA had any business making that recommendation without, knowing what the outcomes are.
Let's talk about your campaign. So behind you, we see this bust of your father, which reminds me of the fact that there's a bust of your father in the Oval Office with President Biden. I know you've said that you have a lot of affection for him as a man. Your family has been friends with him for decades, and that this isn't a personal attack on him. You just have differing views. Why the decision to run for president? Why the decision to run at the same time that there is an incumbent Democratic president?
We need to end this corrupt merger of state and corporate power, which is destroying our country. We're seeing a disintegration of everything we value about this country. They're doing it right in front of us. They're ripping out the middle class in this country, and they're just shifting everything north. And they're strip mining these large corporations like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. Which own everything. They own 88% of the S&P 500. They're now trying to buy every single family home in this country. They're driving the housing price up. That's what's causing the homelessness crisis in this state. This state has 12% of the United States population. It has 50% of the unsheltered homeless.
Yeah.
Why is that? It's not because of drug addiction. There's more drug addiction in West Virginia, and they don't have homeless. It's directly the result of the price of housing. And this County, the median price of a home is $815,000. That means that you have to make about $250,000 a year to be able to afford a home. So, if you're a hotel maid, if you work in a restaurant, if you work in a hair salon, you can't live here anymore.
So this week you sent a letter to the Democratic National Committee saying that you want them to be more transparent, you want to be included in the debates, and let's open up this process. Have you gotten a response back from them?
No.
Do you expect one?
In some dreamy place in my heart, I hope they'll respond. The letter that I sent, I think almost 3 million people have read it now. It's very conciliatory, and the Democratic Party has been my home for my whole life. The Democratic Party has been a home to my family since we came over in 1848 during the potato famine.
Right, probably the most iconic Democratic family of all. So you're a Democrat. You're running for the Democratic nomination. One thing almost every Democrat agrees on is that Joe Biden is better than Donald Trump, even if Joe Biden isn't perfect, and that Donald Trump, most Democrats think, is a threat to democracy. Do you agree with that?
We've got to stop governing by fear, using fear as a governing tool, and we've got to stop running on fear. That if everybody doesn't stay in line,
right,
that this boogeyman is going to take over our country. We have to have democracy in our country. We have to have a lot of people running and a lot of people talking to each other and debating and have unscripted interactions.
Right.
I'm worried about that our country is going to be governed not by somebody who is fully has the mental fluidity and the acuity and the dexterity that is required to govern this country, and that the country instead will be governed by a bunch of faceless technocrats with lanyards who nobody's ever heard of, who are making decisions about whether or not to bring us to nuclear Armageddon. And we're very, very close to that right now. And I want, a president up there who can make those decisions and who's going to understand everything, the entire landscape. And I think President Biden needs to show us all that he has that capacity. There are so many doubts. So many Americans have doubts about that. And I think 70% have questions about his mental acuity. And I'm not going to make a judgment one way or the other. But what I would say is, he needs to come out of the White House and answer that question. He needs to have town halls and unscripted interactions. And you shouldn't be able to run for president. And the only Americans you're talking to are your donors.
So, but if the final choice is Trump versus Biden, right now you're undecided?
If it's Trump, I don't have a plan B. I intend to win this election. And I'm not going to talk about what I'm going to do if that doesn't happen.
One of the things you have been talking a lot about is immigration. You went to the border, and we were there in Beverly Hills as you unveiled this documentary. You're going to be talking more about the issue of immigration here this week in Southern California as well. What struck you most being at the border and seeing it for yourself?
I saw the chaos and that this is a humanitarian crisis, and the people who are the worst victims are the people who are coming across. And I'll tell you why. First of all, they're coming from all over the world. Right. I saw 300 people come over in 2 hours. And they were being brought to the border on buses, 55 in a bus, by the Mexican drug cartels, which now control our borders. They advertise on YouTube and TikTok all over the world and say, send us $15,000, we'll get you into the United States. And everybody who came across knew exactly what was going to happen to them, because it's all outlined on TikTok. They're here to get jobs. They're given a court date 7 years in the future, because we do not have the asylum judges to adjudicate at the border. Mm-hmm. They're here now in the country, but they have no legal status, so they can't work. So they're targeted by unscrupulous employers who pay them $5 or $6 an hour at a construction site or to, clean rooms. And That employer then can underbid a union employer who has to pay union wages. We need to make it easier for legal immigrants. We need to make it quicker for people who are here to get citizenship. But we need to close the borders, slam shut, and I can do that. And I've talked about how I'm going to do it. And but it can be done. It can be done quite easily.
Is it time to stop the policy of catch and release?
You've stopped making it so easy to get in. The drug cartels can't advertise, and it will stop. It will dry up overnight. The other thing that we need to do here, and that I've talked about that I'm going to do immediately, is to make it easy to waive the fee for passport cards, a federal photo ID. I'm going to make sure everybody can get a federal ID who wants it for free. If you say you can't get a job without a federal ID, the border's going to shut down overnight. Because now, the employer's going to go to jail if he employs you. You don't have that, and you can't get it unless you're a U.S. citizen. It'll also do something else. This is why this idea is supported by Andrew Young, by Al Sharpton, by all the civil rights leaders. It will make it so that we can tell people you need an ID to vote, and it will calm down the feelings on both sides, because everybody will be able to get an ID. And at the voting booth, they'll say, show us your ID, and there won't be any more worry about whether or not there's double voting going on.
Still to come, we talk more about the Kennedy family and play personal issues. Stay with us. And this is you in the Oval Office?
And this is me.
We're at Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s L.A. area home as he shows us mementos from his famous family. We play a game called the Name Game, where we usually just come up with one word when you think of something. But if you can think of a sentence or two in terms of the most important leadership lesson from some of your family members, let's try that. And if we could start with your father, the most important leadership lesson you learned from him.
The path to happiness, the path to self-esteem is through service to others. That life was not about just making a big pile for yourself, and whoever dies with the most stuff wins. And I think my dad taught me that the only thing that we build that is durable, that is meaningful, that is lasting, is character.
Most important lesson from President John F. Kennedy?
The most important lesson is what he wanted as his epithet. He kept the peace. He said the primary job of a president of the United States is to keep our country out of war.
Most important lesson from Senator Edward Kennedy?
From Teddy, it was perseverance and compassion. He has more bills named after him, more pieces of legislation than any other senator in the United States history. The way he did that is because he was able to reach across the aisle.
One family member that has said a lot of positive things to me about you, or used to be a family member, I guess, is Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. What do you think is the most important lesson from him?
I think is that anybody would learn was discipline, self-discipline. And if you look at the documentary on him that is now on Netflix, which I watched with Cheryl, and we both agreed, and we both watch a lot of documentaries, we both agreed it was one of the best documentaries we've ever seen.
Yeah. Final family member, your wife, Cheryl Hines. What's the most important thing you've learned from her? What's the most important thing you've learned from her?
I learn something new from her every day, but she's the most honest human being that I've ever met.
And Larry David was a part of that, right? You guys were close friends.
Yeah, Larry introduced me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't intend to, it wasn't like a blind date where I think, although when I went and asked him for permission to date her, because I knew he has all these little rules that I knew that aren't written down anywhere, but you're supposed to know them. And I knew that would be one of his rules because it was his television wife. He said to me, I'm really happy. And she's the best person I've ever met. He said she's beloved in Hollywood. She's the only person in that industry that doesn't have a single enemy. And he was, he was telling me the truth then, but I don't think he was being honest that he was happy that I was dating her. And later, so I think he was probably slightly horrified. And when Cheryl asked him, he had a different answer for it. He said, that'll never work.
Yeah. This is the last thing to just real quick, rapid fire cultural favorites. It's a game we call Personal Issues. So here we go. First thing that comes to mind, what's your favorite TV show other than Curb Your Enthusiasm?
I love this show called The Patriot.
All-time favorite musical artist?
I think I'd have to say Eric Clapton.
Very nice. What's your favorite movie of all time?
The Godfather.
Great choice. Favorite athlete?
Aaron Rodgers.
And what a week for him. And he's a supporter of you too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good reason to like him. And what is your favorite quote or motto?
Live free or die.
Robert F. Kennedy, thank you so much for having us here. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you for
being
having
so
me.
open. Thank you so much. Up next, the Republican governor of North Dakota, presidential candidate Doug Burgum, is here.
The Biden administration is a complete fail. China imports 10 million barrels of oil a day, more than any other country in the world.
North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum on stage for the first Republican debate. We continue our series with the presidential candidates with Governor Burgum here in studio. Governor, welcome to The Issue Is.
Alex, great to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here. I think for a lot of our viewers here in California that may not be that familiar with your life story, if you can, in a real concise way, tell us a little bit about you and how you got to this point.
Well, grew up in North Dakota. Small town kid. Every job I had growing up, working on the farm, the ranch, working at the grain elevator, even working as a chimney sweep, were all jobs where I took a shower at the end of the day. Had the great fortune after undergrad to get into Stanford Business School, had a chance to work in Chicago, understood what was going on in the big cities, saw my first computer and said, wow, this is going to change the world. Literally bet the farm. My dad, a World War II Navy vet, had passed away when I was a freshman in high school, had a little bit of farm ground, mortgaged that. That became the seed capital for a company, Great Plains Software. 18 years later, we were an overnight success story. Built a 2,000-person company selling product all over the world, got acquired for $1.1 billion, and then that began the rest of a career where I spent several more decades building global software companies.
And of course became the governor of North Dakota, although we do have a throwback pic of you from the tech days. And I got to say, your look would fit in well in like Silver Lake here in Southern California now. That would be very popular in many parts of town. Yeah. So nicely done with that, the mullet and the stash.
I reject the mullet thing. I just say that's hockey hair in North Dakota. We weren't so cool. We didn't know what a mullet was.
Okay.
But that was...
Yeah, it's a great look. And I also got to, so you end up doing that, and now you want to be the president of the United States. Why the decision to run for president?
I have no interest in being a senator or congressman, don't see myself as a politician, but the executive branch, governor, president, those are jobs where you can make a difference in people's lives every day in terms of driving solutions. And we need to drive solutions across the economy, energy, national security. That's what we're doing in North Dakota. That's what we can do for the country.
And when we talk about the economy, one thing you talk about the most of all is energy and maybe modeling what North Dakota is doing for the rest of the country. What would be the number one biggest change that you would make in terms of energy as president?
Well, the first thing is we just have to start selling energy to our friends and allies versus buying it from our enemies. You know, we're in a Cold War with China. We're in a cyber war with China every day. We've had 4 members of the Biden administration travel to China to meet with them this summer. No one talks to them about energy. They're the largest importer. We've got this incredible club, a tool, leverage to use in our relationship in this Cold War, and we're not using it because we're too busy trying to shut down the energy industry in the U.S. And I know that people across this state and across the country care about the environment. We do in North Dakota. We're the only state that said we can get to carbon neutrality by 2030 when we do that by innovation, not regulation.
Let's talk about the state of this race. We see Donald Trump leading by like 40 points in a lot of polls. And so it's clear to shake up the race, there needs to be a radical change, not just a 1 or 2% change, but something dramatic has to happen. How does that happen? What is that radical change? How do you win this thing?
In the states where the campaigning has started, Iowa and New Hampshire, the former president is in the low 40s. That means that 60% of the people are looking for an alternative. So there is a path forward for an alternative, and we're working hard every day to be that alternative when the voting starts in January.
And one of the ways that you did that was to get on the debate stage for the first debate. There was this deal where you would give people $20 in terms of a gift card if they donated $1. It was successful. It led to you being on the debate stage. It's unclear whether you're going to be on the next debate stage. Could there be a new deal coming, or how are you going to get there?
Well, we've met all the donor thresholds, and we've met the in-state polling thresholds. We've come close to meeting them for the national threshold, so we're confident that we're going to be there. But I would say the deal that we offered this summer is how we approach government. We came up with an approach that cost 1/5 or less than what the traditional online political pollster companies wanted to charge in terms of customer acquisition. So any California online startup knows that if you're going to launch and you're an unknown product, you've got to have a promotional product. And we're in a great spot because we're the least well-known candidate, but we've got very high favorables. I'm competing against a group of people that may be well-known but have high unfavorables. With dollars coming in, the support that we're getting, people going to DougBurgum.com, we can move ourselves into the top spot.
We know that you're a basketball player. We've got a photo of that from back in the day, too. Look at that power stance right there. You can relate. We know that you injured your Achilles playing basketball recently, so you feel for Aaron Rodgers, who injured his this week. So we always end with music. So we took something that I think you like. This is from Brooks and Dunn. Some boot scootin' boogie for the governor. We hope to see you at the debate in a few weeks here in California.
If I can swing my boot up there.
Yeah, there it is. Look at that.
Right
He
there.
does it all. The boot scootin' boogie for Governor Burgum. Thank you so much. Nice to have you here on The Issue Is. Take it away, guys.
Alex, thank you.
Turn around, go to town, boot scoot boogie.
We encourage you to download The Issue Is podcast for extended conversations with all of our guests. Just search for The Issue Is. Thank you so much for watching us this week. We leave you with a moment of zen. The Above Los Angeles Instagram page taking us above Big Sur. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.